Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 28th day of June in the year of our Lord 2024. I take a brief break from war today, at least from foreign wars, and talk about the war going on right here in America. I will be talking about horrible subjects such as murder, torture, and rape of children. My argument is that the one who enables the dangerous animal to walk out of his cage at the zoo is more responsible for the animal's actions than the animal is. Animals live and survive by instinct, unlike humans who have souls and self-awareness. The rattlesnake doesn't want to strike you, but if he feels threatened, he will strike you. The tiger and the leopard kill the deer and the antelope not because they hate them, but because they are their food and they act out of instinct to survive. Not everyone has the opportunity to see exotic animals like big cats and dangerous reptiles in their natural habitat. So we have zoos even in our big cities. People can go to the zoo and see a tiger, leopard, or cobra safely held in cages. What would happen if the zookeeper was a deranged lunatic or just someone who hated his fellow human beings and he intentionally left the cage doors open? It would be even worse if he opened the cages and then left tasty snacks around the local neighborhood just to whet the appetites of the hungry animals. When the animals leave the zoo, having no conscience, never hearing that voice that says, no, don't do that, because it would be despicable, vile, disgusting, and human society will punish you if you do. The animal is devoid of that capacity to reason, so simply reacts on instinct and he kills. The unfortunate victim of the animal just happened to be available when the animal felt the instinctive drive of hunger or fear in the wild. The tiger and the leopard will look at the herd of antelope to determine if there are any sick or crippled in the herd because they would be easier to catch, less able to defend themselves. The sick, diseased animals who live and circulate among normal humans pretending to be human themselves operate the same way. Their victim is usually a child or a vulnerable woman. Why do we never hear about a Navy SEAL or a Delta Force trooper being raped and murdered by the animals among us? The answer is the same as the leopard and the antelope, and that reason is the leopard picks the slowest, not the fastest. My point with this introduction is not to argue that the humans among us who prey on the weak and helpless are without guilt. Far from it, in my opinion. The laws designed to protect us should offer more concern and compassion for the victim while respecting the constitutional right of the accused to be judged fairly. The debate about the death penalty for horrible crimes is for us to take up another day. My argument today, though, is that the one who intentionally leaves the zoo cage open, entices the leopard into a civilized neighborhood, is more guilty of the crime than the leopard. The leopard has to be put down because now he's a human killer. That is because in a civilized society we respect human life and we put a high value on it. That value is so high that if you unlawfully take one, a human life that is, you just might forfeit your own. In order to start the process of regaining our way as free Americans, we must begin to respect and protect human life again. The issue in this Castle report is who is the most responsible when the leopard kills a child, the leopard or the zookeeper, President Joe Biden, and his Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, are the zookeepers in America today. People voted for Joe Biden, but no one voted for Mayorkas except those in the U.S. Senate who confirmed him. Blame falls on them as well as on everyone with any capacity to remove these men from public office who failed to do so. Mr. Mayorkas, who I realize is just the gun in the hand of Joe Biden, was born in Havana, Cuba in 1959. I wish his family had remained in Cuba, where Alejandro would undoubtedly have been more comfortable living under that communist system. I might be wrong about that, folks, on second thought, because the Castro brothers would probably have been less tolerant of child rape and murder than our present Democrat administration. Let me speak now about specific crimes of the most horrifying nature, at least they would be to any normal human. These two men are guilty of these crimes just as if they had literally committed them by themselves because they left the zoo cage open. They invited the leopards into the surrounding neighborhoods. They did it intentionally. Women are at risk from men, always have been. Our laws are designed to preserve the lives of the weak and the helpless from the monsters who live among us. But lately, this country, through its president, has been importing monsters in record numbers. These monsters have been going about their animalistic crimes in a mind-numbing number of places around the country, snatching random women off the streets, raping, torturing, and murdering them seemingly at will. Horrifyingly, many of the victims have been children. So let me just take a moment to calm down, folks. Calm down, because this triggers something in me. Perhaps it is a long dormant training from 50 years ago which taught me that we were to fight to protect the women and children back home. To speak of all the victims would numb our minds, might even be disrespectful to them. I would never use the names of these women and children under normal circumstances, but their deaths have been so publicized that their names and pictures are all over the internet. If you don't use the internet for news and you rely on the New York Times, the TV networks, your local paper, whatever, then you might have a different view, one that is less clear than mine. I will give you just a few examples to illustrate my point. Please keep in mind that these examples are just the obvious, most publicized, but there are literally dozens of rapes and murders. They are happening far too often to keep up with. Rachel Morin, mother of 5 children, 37 years old, decided to go for a run on a quiet trail in her peaceful suburban hometown of Bel Air, Maryland, where she was raped and murdered. 23-year-old Victor Martinez Hernandez was finally arrested after DNA evidence linked him to the crime. He was invited into this country in January 2023 after murdering a woman in his home of El Salvador. Once in America, he attacked and brutalized a mother and her 9-year-old daughter during a home invasion robbery in March of 2023 in Los Angeles. DNA linked the two cases together, tied them to Mr. Hernandez. Miss Moran's murder, according to the sheriff of her town, was the second in Harford County, Maryland, in 2 years by an illegal from a criminal gang in El Salvador. We are 1,800 miles from the border, so this should not be happening, he said. This is where I point out that absent the invitation of Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas, Mr. Hernandez would be sitting in an El Salvador prison or dead. To put it bluntly, dozens of women and girls would be alive and safe today if it were not for Joe Biden and his henchmen. Here's the latest atrocity, at least the latest that I'm aware of. A 12-year-old child, Jocelyn Nungare, found strangled to death in a creek in Houston, Texas. 2 illegal aliens from Venezuela were arrested for her death. These 2 men are Johan Jose Rangel Martinez, age 21, Franklin Jose Pena Ramos, age 26. Mr. Ramos had his bail set at $10 million. The 2 men reportedly lured the child under a bridge where they assaulted her for hours before they murdered her and left her body in a drainage canal. Mr. Ramos was detained by the Border Patrol in El Paso, Texas on May 28th, but under the catch and release orders of Joe Biden, they released him to rape, torture, and murder this poor child. According to the local district attorney, Kim Ogg, both suspects could face the death penalty, so I must assume that she was not appointed to her position by George Soros. I know that down in Texas, if you kill one of theirs, sometimes they kill you back. So let's just hope, folks, that justice is done. No, wait a minute. On second thought, justice is not achievable in this case because the real rapists, the real torturers, the real murderers are protected and above the law. This November, literally tens of millions of Americans will vote to endorse what these killers have done. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said, quote, "Kill kids in Texas, you get the death penalty. That little girl would be alive today if Biden enforced immigration law at the border," end quote. Donald Trump called the child's mother to offer sympathy and support. Joe Biden issued a press release saying he wished condolences to the family, the identical press release to the one for the mother of 5 who was murdered and raped in Maryland. The community around Jocelyn's neighborhood has contributed to her GoFundMe account, as one might expect them to do. That's fine, but nothing will bring Jocelyn back. Nothing will relieve the suffering of her family. One more case just to let you know. Some children are able to escape from their rapists and their murderers, despite the efforts of the undocumented guest here in America. Last week, a 13-year-old girl and another child were walking home from school in Flushing Meadow, New York. It was about 3:30 p.m., so broad daylight in a public place. Her attacker, Christian Inga Linde, was from Ecuador. He entered the country, it is believed, 2021. Inga was ordered by an immigration judge in New York City to leave the country on February 2nd, 2022. The judge told him, leave the country, but he didn't. He crossed the Mexican border on June 25th, 2021 with his son and entered Eagle Pass, Texas, where he was quickly captured, processed, and released. The two were deemed inadmissible by the Border Patrol, but under the Biden rules, what can you do? He grabbed the girl and a male friend, forced them with a machete into a secluded area where he tied them with shoelaces and raped the little girl. He stole their cell phones, but he did not kill them, which was an unusual act of mercy for such a wild animal. I imagine this child will remember this event for the rest of her life, but I hope and pray she finds some peace. Everyone in the system contributed to her suffering, from the agents who are just doing their jobs all the way to the White House. Joe Biden is, however, responsible for her rape, as he is the leader who invited it by opening the zoo cage. Here are just a few more, some of whom I've talked about before. February 22nd, 2024, Laken Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student, went for a run on her college campus and was kidnapped, assaulted, and bludgeoned to death by illegal immigrant Venezuelan Jose Ibarra. July 27th, 2022, Frederick, Maryland. Yes, folks, it looks like Maryland is a dangerous place, but I surmise it's just close to D.C., the very epicenter of crime. Kayla Hamilton, age 20, was raped and strangled to death with a phone charging cord. The illegal alien was 17 years old, a murderer, so a juvenile. His name wasn't released, but he entered the country illegally in 2021, despite his known affiliation with the violent El Salvador gang MS-13. His tattoos, even his shirt, screamed violent MS-13, but they let him go anyway. They let him in because that's their orders. I could go on all day with examples because Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas are allowing their invited guests to go on raping and murdering at his phenomenal rate, but enough's enough, folks. The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, a division of the United Nations, tells us that sexual violence against females is rampant in Latin America. In fact, what the organization calls femicide is soaring in Latin America. It's one of the drivers of immigration. Okay, folks, hearing that, why do our leaders want so badly to create the same atmosphere of fear and violence here in America? Why do American women continue to vote for it? Democrats Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas know the people they are inviting into the country are rapists, murderers, criminals, thieves, and monsters, along with those who are just seeking a better life, but they just don't care. I have to assume they're getting what they want from it, but I do wonder why so many women support them. I don't want to be too hard on Democrat women because it seems they are so committed to abortion that everything else is just lies and fake news. It's Baghdad Bob, folks, Baghdad Bob all over again, i.e., you are not seeing this. This is not happening. Finally, folks, there are three levels of guilt here. The first is the murderer and the rapist, who is just a gun in the hands of the zookeeper. The second is the zookeeper, and that is Joe Biden and his toadies. He is the most responsible, most guilty of the rape, torture, and murder of at least dozens of women and girls in America on his watch. The third are the people who vote to put such people in power because I guess they just don't believe the stories. To those Democrat women who don't believe the stories, I would suggest calling Jocelyn. But now I remember, folks, she was raped and murdered, so they can't call her. At least that's the way I see it. Until next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.